with the question of rare, brief, and non-recurring, they are actually tied to our system performance measures, but more importantly, the issue of being able to get to rare, brief, and non-recurring is a funding issue, a fiscal issue. So we've presented information to the homeless leadership team that shows very directly that at those numbers that we're talking about now, that's about 42 units a month. But we only have funding for 7. So that's a huge gap in just being able to pay for units, much less being able to identify units that are open to people who are in these circumstances with higher barriers. So the rare, brief, and non-recurring, we'll get there when we have the funding to do it. Yeah, we're just really limited. There's really no way to get to that place until we increase those resources.
So, so with existing funding, it's more time.
Yes.
So this is just to say that, we're going to, I'm sure, based on what we're hearing, we're going to see very, very significant strides along the way, but not get there all at once, most likely, even given the funding. And I would just suggest that means, we're going to be looking at an unsolved problem getting solved over a period of time. And I would just suggest that the current program, the status quo program, that sort of, that we implicitly have, is horrible. I think the idea of having...
Say that one more time.
The status quo program for people who aren't yet being served in some way, right?
If I may, the difference between people who are living on the street and our ability to house them, there's a group of people who don't have a place to go.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And the idea that, that our current program is, of having people just find a place in the woods or sleep in doorways, it's very expensive. It's because we've got people, taking round trips through jails because they're more likely to end up on emergency response vehicles, very expensive, bad for business, bad for response times, and I don't think it's great for the rest of the population to have people who don't have access to sanitation, other than restaurant bathrooms, and I just think it's a horrible system. And so, if this is potentially part of something that gets us between here and there, I'm certainly interested in it. And I see a long list of obstacles, and I'd like to maybe take a shot at just make a few brief comments, about some of the obstacles that have been represented. We say there's no allowable land use under, the Denton Development Code, but that really is the whole point of coming before council. That's within our power to craft a, I'm not saying it won't take effort, and you described it, but it's something within our capacity. You mentioned in the backup need for utility site plan, and I think that is likely. I think that's likely to be city driven. There's a question about how much does the city need to do, and how much would this organization do? I think similar to Monsignor King, right there, the city provided a structure with utilities. I think here you're talking about something simpler. That was an existing animal shelter, but I think you're talking about something like what you might have at a campground. So yeah, for sure, that's got to get planned and built, but that's not outside the range of many kinds of things that we see come before us. Fire plan, absolutely, but there are also established examples. This isn't the first thing like this ever, attempted. There's something like 28 or 26 around the country of similar kind of neighborhoods like this. So there are established examples we can look at. As far as health and sanitation requirements, I do think that something like dumpster service, like you might have, like at a campsite, probably would be asked of the city. But as far as concerns that were raised about, well, how do people cook? How do they store food? Where do they take the dog? It's a neighborhood. I don't think it's a self-governing neighborhood. It's not something run by the city. I don't think it's on us to decide, like for anybody else in any other neighborhood, how they do that. There's questions about safety and security. Again, the city's being asked to provide certain basic services, but it's meant to be run by a self-governing. It's meant to be self-governing with the oversight of a nonprofit. Liability and risk have come up, certainly, but that would be an expectation of the nonprofit to carry the insurance. There's questions raised about how would we probe neighborhood and community support. Absolutely, but it's something the city does all the time. We know how to notice and have meetings, and we know how to do those things. There's a question raised about case management that's not actually being necessarily asked of the city, but I'd say to the extent that case management is provided by the city or nonprofits to these people exist now. So if anything, it's easier to find them if they're all in one place. As far as what are the goals and outcomes, I think that would be defined by the nonprofit. It's a totally reasonable question. I think you're likely to hear that it's going to be a mixture of a very inexpensive form of supportive housing for some, it's emergency housing for some, it's transitional housing for some. It was mentioned in the backup that there's a need to determine what the costs would be and what the requested assistance is. Sure, that is work to do, like for every single item that comes before us. I think that's about it. Now, and let me just close by saying, sounds interesting to me, but to me it's not important that we necessarily do this. My question is, ultimately, does it fit into a broader strategic plan that you're going to come to us with? And if it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm pleased, very pleased to hear that, you're looking at it comprehensively with an idea of reaching a goal. That we're moving beyond just saying, look, we're doing a lot. It's like, which is great. But I think it's even better that you're saying we want to achieve a goal, and we're going to look at a comprehensive way to do it. So I applaud all that. Speech over.